I debated doing a live today and decided against it because what I've been thinking about talking about is just has some really personal things, and I just wanted to make sure it was well thought through and that nothing came out of my mouth that I would regret later, just with personal information. Oh, I feel a lot less nervous doing it this way. A quick thing is, if this is your first time ever watching anything with me in it, I was married for 5 years in a mentally, emotionally abusive relationship. I have one sweet baby girl from it, and she was 16 months when it was over. And so since then, I navigated 5 years as a single mom, single in all sense of the words, all capacities. And now I've been married to Ted with his 3 kids for 4 years. Something I really struggle with is guilt. Not from my first marriage or my divorce. I know that there was nothing I could do to change the outcome of what happened, barring not having married him in the first place. But I had no control there over what happened, so that's not where I feel guilt. But where I've really struggled with guilt is my handling of things since, as I guess the popular word right now is co-parenting, but trying to figure out how to co-parent, but with somebody who is not necessarily healthy in his mind. And I could go off and I could rattle to you ways of how I tried to handle it wisely, kindly, godly. But in a sense, none of that matters, because whether I handled it that way or not, I walk around with guilt every day. And it gets worse at certain points of the year. Probably my worst time of year where it really peaks is at Christmas time, and then I'm screwed for a significant time after. So my daughter has not seen her birth father in 2 years. And at first, it was his choosing. But in the end, it's been her choosing. And I have worked through this step by step with my counselor, who is amazing. Just trying to make sure I handle everything right. I never want Summer, when she's older, to say I screwed things up, or I withheld her, or I did this, or I did that. And it's been a very hard road to navigate. And I won't get into details about anything, but there have been a number of different instances or certain requests or whatever over the last 2 years that especially have just left me with guilt. And literally every decision I have to make, I immediately text my counselor because I don't know how to do this. But I always end up going back to her because I don't know how to handle my guilt. And she talks about how I am a guilt-ridden person, just in general. Like, I'm going to deal with guilt in any circumstance or scenario. It's just the way I'm functioning. So I got to make some adjustments. But literally 1 week ago, I texted her and I said, all I said, one sentence, I need an action step to deal with my guilt. I was drowning in it. And I had spent that morning going, okay, like, why am I walking around with guilt? What's the reality of this? And just trying to look at it and get perspective. And I couldn't do it. And she wrote back novel after novel of practical steps to do that I have to do. And just trying to rationalize with my thinking and point out things. And just so you can maybe understand where a lot of my guilt is coming from, I used to not have boundaries down with my ex. So I would let whatever he said or did go. And he called the shots, whether it was for my benefit or Summer's benefit or not. I just let it go. And a few years ago, a different counselor of mine said, you need to put down boundaries because this isn't a healthy situation. It's a little dangerous. You need to put boundaries in place. And I really struggled with this. And I struggle with it because I feel like it's ungodly. And I go, okay, well, but aren't we supposed to love people? Aren't we supposed to forgive 70 times 70 or whatever the numbers are? Like basically infinitely giving forgiveness and blah, blah, blah. And I can't reconcile that in my head. And even now with my current counselor, I just am always feeling guilty about a decision and going, this isn't loving, this isn't godly, this isn't doing everything you can for this person. And anyways, 2 years ago, she had been my counselor for a long time, but then due to circumstances, I couldn't see her for a number of years. And so I went back 2 years ago. And I said, I need to be removed from this emotional cycle because I was in a very bad emotional cycle with him. And it just was always going. It was always on repeat. And she said that enough is enough. She said, you no longer receive his communications. They go to Ted. He doesn't need to know, but he controls it so that your emotions can't be played with. And Ted can just come to you and present the request or whatever needs to be said. I tell Ted how to respond and he deals with it. And at first I really struggled with this because it's actually amazing how much you are, how my counselor said it, almost addicted to it now, addicted to the emotional cycle. And so at first I would always ask Ted, have you heard anything? Have you heard anything? And I couldn't let it go. But eventually I got to a point where I have forgotten about it. And he would just come to me when something needed to be talked about and we would deal with it. And it was amazingly freeing. Even just that day when she told me, I had to pull over and just cry on the side of the road because I felt like this was what I needed to hear for a number of years. And now finally someone was giving me a step on how to release myself from his grip, I guess is what you'd say. So that was one very, very big boundary that I think of when I think about putting down boundaries. But I still would always struggle with feeling guilty with my relationship with God. And always feeling like I was sinning or doing the wrong thing and not loving him properly, not loving him like God would. And my counselor's been awesome with it. And so I had called her, texted her last week, and she said all this stuff that helped. But then I got to a certain chapter in this book, Forgiving What You Can't Forget. I'm going to be honest that for the first few chapters, I wasn't really into this book. And I kept thinking, I don't really need this. Like, I'm not in the heart of it. I'm not in the crisis of it. So I was kind of forcing myself through it. And then I got to this chapter called Boundaries That Help Us Stop Dancing with Dysfunction. And I thought, okay, maybe this will apply. And it was early morning, and I read it, and I was a disaster. And I fell apart, and Ted was sitting there having his own quiet time. We don't normally talk with this stuff, like whenever our quiet time is our own thing, but I need to read you this. And so I just started reading the lines that I underlined, and I was sobbing by the end of it because I think I just had so much clarity. Not that it's resolved, because today I had to go through it again because I think it's just going to be steps that I have to deal with. But I wanted to share this because maybe there are other Christian women out there struggling with the guilt issue and dealing with maybe the same kind of circumstance or maybe something different. And it's hard to believe that God would call you to put up boundaries because they feel unloving. So I just want to walk through. I wrote down the quotes because I find that they stick in my memory better if I write them down. So I'm just going to read some of the key ones. Basically, this is not one of the ones that hit me profoundly, but it just said that relationships that need boundaries will not get better on their own. And it actually didn't hit me the first day, but it hit me today, and I was like, yep, okay, that's true. The more you allow their actions to cost you, the greater debt you will be in that you eventually have to forgive. Because it will just keep adding up. Because if I don't put down boundaries, the hurt and angering things will just continue to happen, and things that I have to forgive will just keep compounding on top of each other. This line really hurt, but I think it's because it held truth. It is truly the most heartbreaking moment of anyone's life when they have to release a loved one to the consequences of their choices. But it's also the only chance that either of you have at getting any better. And maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe I'm not good at releasing him and taking my hands off, because there was genuine love there, and you want to see someone get better and thrive. But as I wrote this comment, I thought back to that day where I had to stop communication and give it to Ted. And if I'm all honest, my heart has been set free in 2 years. Like, obviously I still struggle with other stuff, but I have been released from recycling anger and recycling frustration and impatience and honestly bad-mouthing and venting. And even with my relationships here, right in the home, like, there were times where I would just go upstairs after a bad conversation or something and just sob. And I sent the kids outside or blah, blah. And I was shot for the rest of the day, but at least a couple hours I'd be in bed just crying. I couldn't handle the emotions that I was being dragged through. And for 2 years, I have been liberated from that and free to love better even the people around me. This was hindering me from loving this because it was just all encompassing. And so it is hard to release that person, but it has been a source of healing for me as well. And she also said that it's the only chance you have at staying healthy enough to walk the road to forgiveness. And I believe that because I don't think I could really forgive so long as I was in the heat of it and in the cycle of it. I'm going to share 2 of her analogies. The one really hit me hard, but they gave me clarity. She said it's like the person is laying on the tracks, the train tracks, and the train is coming, the train wreck is coming. But your person is either daydreaming and unaware that problems are coming or consequences are coming, or they're living in denial. There's not a train coming. I'm going to be fine. Nothing's going to happen. I'm not going to get wrecked. But the problem is, my ex isn't the one laying on the tracks panicking. He's in a daydream or in denial. He's fine. Mentally, not physically, because that train's coming. I'm the one losing my mind watching it, not him. I'm the one losing sleep, not him. I'm the one jumping up and down and waving my arms and waving red flags, doing all these things that I could possibly do to save him. I'm doing frantic actions to try and save him, but he's not doing anything. And she said, even if I get him off of the tracks today and in this moment, he will climb right back on them tomorrow. And that really hit me because that's what I was doing. I am still trying to do, but I won't share how I was trying to do that. But I was still trying to control him and change him. But if I would keep intervening and pushing and then maybe he would change for a second. But I was going to be having that conversation again tomorrow because it wasn't him doing the changing. It was me pushing it. And I remember when I first became a Beachbody coach, some of the people in my workout group, at the beginning, I said, you know what? They said their problem is waking up or getting started or blah, blah, blah. And I said, don't worry. I'll text you in the morning, or what time do you want to do it? I'll text you and I'll make sure you choose to do it. Like, you'll do these workouts. But when you're 6 months in and the person still won't get up and work out unless you've texted them and told them to do it, that made me reach my breaking point. And I had to walk away. And I had to tell myself, you're not reminding this person anymore. If they're not choosing most of the time to do the workout themselves, then it's not a head and a heart change. They don't want this. They don't want to work out. They're still totally dependent on you for any form of action. And I thought I could do these reminders long term, but I realized it's exhausting and frustrating because they say what they want, but they're not willing to do what needs to be done to make that change happen. And it's the same with this. It was like I was giving my ex a reminder call, a wake-up call every day. Come on, come on. But there's only so long you can sustain this because he's not setting his own alarm. He's not putting on his own workout clothes and choosing to work out. It's all me making sure it happens. And that is exhausting on me. And that keeps him relying on me and not making any change on his own. And she said a line here that says, if your heart is more committed to change than theirs is, you may delay the train wreck, but not forever. Eventually, the train will hit. The more you keep jumping on the tracks to try and rescue him, the more likely it is the train will run over you both. And what hit me here is, in the last 2 years, there have been instances where I've wanted to push Summer and force her into a relationship that she doesn't want with him right now. And to be honest, a relationship that isn't safe for her right now. But because I feel so bad for him and so guilty, I've been trying to force her to appease my own guilt. And when I read this, I thought, oh my gosh, like, I am not just jumping up on the train tracks to try to rescue him and putting him and me at risk of getting run over. I am dragging Summer up there with me onto those train tracks of saying, come on, Summer, we gotta save him, we gotta save him. And I'm pulling her up there, and I'm totally putting her life at risk. Instead of loving her and protecting her, I'm dragging her into this dangerous zone. And then what Ted pointed out is it's not just Summer. I'm dragging him there, and I'm dragging my parents there, and friends, and whoever else is around me, because I'm spending so much time at the train track trying to pull them off that I'm not spending any time mentally, emotionally, physically with all these other people that I should be loving. I'm throwing all of this aside so I can live at this train track to make sure he doesn't get hit. And that is sacrificing everybody else in my life. And then she gave an example of CPR, and she said, if someone stops breathing or their heart stops, you can do compressions. And that's great. But this person can't live 60 years with someone pushing compressions on their heart and keeping their heart alive. That's not going to work. At some point, the heart has got to beat on its own. It can't be sustained with someone else making compressions. And she said, even the best doctors and nurses know this. At some point, they say, this can't work. The heart is done. It's not choosing to beat on its own. And then the one line that I think made me realize maybe where the source of most of my guilt is coming from, which I didn't know until I read this line, was she said, choosing to not rescue from the tracks, choosing to no longer compress his heart, this does not mean that I don't care about him. And I thought that by putting up boundaries to protect me, to protect Summer, because I had to put up a wall to protect us, I think I felt like that just meant I didn't care for him. I wasn't caring for him. I wasn't being loving. And maybe that's why the guilt hurts the most, because there is love there, and there is care and concern and worry there. And that's why it's so hard to walk away from the train track, because you do love the person and you do care for the person, but it's unsustainable. So I think I needed to know that it was okay to do these things. It does not reflect your heart. It does not reflect your care and concern. It doesn't reflect any of that. It is strictly a measure of safety for me, for people around me, for him as well. All it means is that you change your role in your job description. And something I thought the other day was, my role has changed in his life. My job description has changed. And I think sometimes where my fear and guilt comes from is that I think that God chose not to fill the position with someone else. He chose to downsize and eliminate that job position entirely. Instead of having faith that God will fill that job position, He has let me go from it. He has moved me on to another career, other job positions, other roles in my life. But He has filled that job position. There are other people to love and have compassion and help and guide and be wise with my ex and lead him. I am not in that job position, but God has put somebody else in there, and I need to trust that, because when I do, that can take away the fear, because God hasn't abandoned him. I had to put up boundaries to protect myself and my family, but He's capable of filling those shoes with somebody else who is not at risk to have the same hurt, who can handle it better. Like she said, I want him to be saved, but I am not to be his savior. And my counselor had said that to me 2 years ago. She said, it is not your job anymore. God's going to do it through someone else. And I think I just need to be set free from that guilt of feeling like it still is my job. And then she said, only be honest with yourself. Only be around them as much as my reactions and actions have the capacity to handle. And when I think back to how I was when we used to have more contact, it was not good. It was a stress, day in, day out, a hurt. anxiety, fear. I was not handling it well. And she said, this seems counterintuitive, but it's actually biblical love. And so she had us read Romans 12, 9 to 21. And she wanted me to look at all these things that the verses are telling you to do and ask, what keeps me in a place to live this way? And what pushes me past my spiritual capacity to do what these verses say? And so, just to give you examples, one of the instructions in those verses is keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. When I was heavier into it, it was killing my spiritual fervor. Patient in affliction, not a chance. Desperately trying, but it was just such a vicious cycle that was continuous, I couldn't do it. The biggest one that hit me was bless and do not curse. It led to me venting to Ted or friends and just not saying the nicest things at all, or thinking the nicest things about the person and maybe making fun of them. Live in harmony with one another. Absolutely not. When we were in communication, not because I wasn't trying, but it wasn't possible. It wasn't possible. Do not be conceited. I think sometimes when I see how often he would fall short, I think I did get conceited and think I was better than him. That's embarrassing to say out loud. Maybe I'll edit it out, but we'll see. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And I tried, it could not happen. And be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone, not just my ex. And I was only concerned about my ex and not concerned about protecting Summer or loving my family. Like, it wasn't everyone's eyes. I just wanted his approval and his acceptance. And so when I read those verses and I thought about what she said, I think it started to maybe sink in a little bit, like that it is biblical love to put up boundaries, because if I don't put up boundaries, I can't do these things. And these things are 100% biblical love. It's right. It's in the Bible. That's how he wants me to live. And if I don't put up boundaries, I can't live the way he wants me to. And maybe over time, he'll increase my spiritual capacity to open my heart more or take some of the boundaries away. But right now, it's okay to have them up and grow and pray for him to grow me. And maybe and grow my spiritual capacity so later I can do more. But right now, I've got to do this to make sure I can love him properly and love those around me. She also said boundaries help to hold me together, which I thought, that's true too. Otherwise, I go from gentle, calm, patient words to angry words, fuming words, sad words, hurtful words. I go from forgiveness to feeling bitter. I go from saying sincere words to being frustrated or making rude remarks, she said. As we grow in Christ, our capacity for compassion should have the ability to expand. Distance actually enables me to love and respect him better. Ooh, this was a hard one. Don't confuse the command to love with the disease to please. Don't confuse the command to love with the disease to please. Yeah. I want his acceptance. I want his approval. I want him to not be mad at me. And then one of the final things she said was, I am doing this for the other people I do life with. I don't just do life with my ex. In fact, very little part of my life is actually dealing with that. I do the majority of my life with my husband and with my daughter and with my stepkids and with my friends and with my clients and with my parents. And I can't love them properly and be emotionally stable, mentally stable, if I continue to stay at the tracks and make sure my ex doesn't get hit. I might be pulling him off while one of my other loved ones is wandering onto another track and I wasn't there to help. So to pull away and put up distance and boundaries and safety nets and precautions helps me actually live a life of love more fully. And I honestly don't think I realized that till I just said that right now. I'm so desperate to love in this one specific way to this one specific person that it makes it almost impossible to love in all these other ways with all these other people because I'm so focused on this. Whereas boundaries help me to still love him and have compassion, but it also frees me to love everywhere else too, and in all different kinds of ways. So maybe it is biblical love to put up boundaries. And I think I just need this to sink in. And I wanted to say this because I've been living with this for years, and I don't know who else has been. I just hope one person listens to this and gets something from it. I hope you are encouraged.